Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Jess Lenore in Baltimore. On Monday, March 20th, the city of Baltimore is poised to pass a historic $15 minimum wage bill, giving workers in a city marked by both opportunity and immense economic inequality pay bumps until $15 minimum wage is reached in 2022, and for businesses with less than 50 employees by 2026. What makes this all the more significant is the wave of anti-minimum wage efforts being pushed by the restaurant and business lobby in numerous states across the country. Today's guest, Justin Miller, is a writer for the American Prospect, where he has tracked these efforts in a new piece titled, "Emboldened by Trump, Minimum Wage Hike Opponents Fight Back." Thanks so much for joining us again.
Thanks, sir.
So I wanted to start in Maryland, which is interesting for a number of reasons. Monday, Baltimore is expected to pass a $15 minimum wage measure. It seems like it's going to have a veto-proof majority. The mayor, who's a Democrat, hasn't taken a position on it. And then in two other jurisdictions, both PG and Montgomery County, they're also considering a $15 minimum wage. And what makes it all the more interesting is that in this legislative session, a Democrat, Derek Davis of PG County, he proposed a measure that is a preemption measure that would have blocked minimum wage increases, and it's something that's out of the Koch brothers playbook, out of the ALEC playbook. And at a hearing, he was slammed for proposing this in Maryland. Can you talk a little bit about these sort of measures and efforts that are happening as far as preempting minimum wage increases across the country?
Sure. So one of the kind of leading progressive strategies in recent years has been to push for local minimum wages by passing legislation at the city and county level to institute higher minimum wages than is set at the state level. And state Republicans, where GOP controls the majority of the states and has deep majorities in a lot of the state legislative chambers, have responded in kind by pushing and passing legislation and laws that ban the right of cities and counties and municipalities to institute local labor laws, specifically minimum wage laws, paid sick leave policies, and things like that. So that trend has kind of accelerated since 2010, and now about almost half of the states in the country, I think, have some type of local preemption law on the books.
And so the business lobby argues, and has across the country, they've argued that raising the minimum wage on a local level is going to cause businesses to flee out of those jurisdictions. It's going to cause businesses to lay off workers. Those seem to be their main arguments against this. But if you look at what the impact has been in all the places that have raised the minimum wage, including Seattle and in California, in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and in other places, that's never quite happened. And that's one of the reasons why in a number of states, ballot measures were passed to increase the minimum wage. And a reason why a $15 minimum wage failed last year and is going to pass this year in Baltimore is because there was 7 new council people that got voted in. The old council people that blocked it, most of them got voted out, and there's a new council in here. So talk about what the business lobby efforts look like now, knowing that it seems like public opinion is in favor of these policies of raising the minimum wage.
Right. And as you mentioned, the kind of key line of argument coming from the business lobby groups and the restaurant industry is that local minimum wage laws will kill small businesses' profit margins and make them hard to do business, and will kill jobs, and will also kind of create a patchwork of regulations across the state and make it harder to operate business. I think, as you mentioned, it's that time and time again has been proven to be kind of a bunk argument and doesn't really mesh well with reality. And again, as you said, the minimum wage increases have been astoundingly popular when put directly to voters. In 2014, minimum wage increases passed on the ballot in 4 red states, and then just this past November, 2016, they passed 4 more ballot measures in Arizona, Colorado, Washington, and Maine, all by pretty substantial margins to increase the state minimum wage levels. So I think it's pretty clear that it's become a very effective strategy for labor advocates to try and put this issue directly before voters and kind of provide an end around, an end run around the business lobby and their lobbying on state legislature and local political bodies. And so in Arizona, for instance, the ballot measure passed in November by 58%. And pretty quickly after, the Arizona Chamber of Commerce and Industry filed a lawsuit claiming that the ballot measure was illegal because it didn't stipulate how the state would fund it. A lower court in Arizona ruled against the business lobby, and then they appealed before the Supreme Court. And just earlier this week, the Supreme Court struck down the Chamber of Commerce's argument. And so, but it kind of shows you just how desperate business groups are to stop these statewide ballot measures. When they're being approved after they're being approved by a vast majority of voters.
And what's interesting also is that in Maine, the tip wage was abolished, and now the federal tip wage is something like $2.13, and in many places the tip wage isn't included when the minimum wage is increased for normal wage workers. And so there's an effort underway in Maine right now to reinstate that tip wage, which affects restaurant workers and other low-wage workers that are often immigrants as well. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So in Maine, again, the ballot measure was approved by voters in November to increase the state minimum wage and slowly phase out the tip minimum wage, which I believe is currently at $2.75 or $3.75, and pretty quickly, again, the Maine Restaurant Association, which is the state chapter of the National Restaurant Association, has pretty aggressively gone after legislators in the state house, convincing them to push legislation that would abolish the aspect of the ballot measure that phases out the tip minimum wage. And in the state Senate, which is Republican controlled, they have a pretty wide base of support. But in the state House of Representatives, which is currently controlled by Democrats, they've been lobbying even more aggressively, trying to peel off support for doing with the tip minimum wage increase for Democrats. And so far, they've succeeded, and they've managed to get somewhere between 6 and 8 Democratic House members to voice support and potentially vote to roll back the tip minimum wage increase.
And in Maryland, when it was a Democrat who introduced, or 3 Democrats that co-sponsored the bill, the preemption measure, which it's now seems to be withdrawn from committee after the outpouring of anger against it. It caused many, especially local elected officials, to question, whether these are true Democrats that are supporting these measures. The $15 minimum wage is part of the Democratic Party platform, and it's something that will directly impact and lift up. In Baltimore alone, something like almost 80,000 workers will be impacted and directly uplifted by these kind of measures. Do you think that is troubling, or is that a sign of a potential rift in the Democratic Party? Whether people support these measures or not.
Right. For the past 5 or 6 years, the preemption game has been primarily played by Republicans who have control of state legislatures. But in Maryland, where you have a Democratic-controlled legislative body, business lobbyists need to kind of play ball with Democrats, and there are a lot of Democrats across the country that have close ties to industry special interests, and I think the introduction of that legislation, even if it didn't end up getting out of committee, is an indication that there are Democrats who are willing to kind of abide by these arguments coming from the industry that it will kill jobs and that it will cripple small business. So I think in Maryland and in Maine are kind of the first couple instances of Democrats really being so clearly kind of on the industry's side on this issue, and whether or not that kind of has a ripple effect across the country kind of remains to be seen. Currently in Minnesota, the newly controlled Republican legislature, the House just passed a preemption bill that would block cities like Minneapolis and St. Paul from instituting minimum wages, and the newly Republican-controlled state Senate will soon be voting on that, and then that'll go before the Mark Dayton, the Democratic governor. So that will be kind of another test on a statewide level of where Democrats stand on this issue.
All right, Justin Miller, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us at the Real News Network.